My son sold my wife's classic car to take his wife to Dubai, then the car dealership owner called me. I didn't know that morning that the last thing my wife ever touched would be sitting on a stranger's showroom floor with a "for sale" sign hanging from its rearview mirror. The call came at 10:17 a.m. I remember the exact time because I had just poured myself a second cup of coffee, staring at the empty chair across the kitchen table, the one Margaret used to sit in for 38 years. The house had been quiet since she passed. Too quiet. When my phone rang, I almost didn't answer. Unknown number. "Mr. Harold Bennett?" the voice asked. "Yes. This is Daniel Ruiz from Silvercrest Classic Motors. I believe we need to talk about a 1967 Mustang Fastback." My heart stopped. The Mustang. Margaret's car. The one she had owned since she was 22. The one she refused to sell even when we struggled to pay our mortgage. The one she said would outlive both of us. My grip tightened on the counter. "What about it?" I asked carefully. There was a pause on the other end. "Sir, it was sold to us yesterday." Silence. "That's not possible," I said slowly. "That car isn't for sale." "Well," Daniel continued cautiously, "a man named Eric Bennett signed the transfer paperwork. My son. My only son." I felt something cold spread through my chest. "That's my son," I said. "Yes, sir. He claimed ownership through inheritance. We processed it legally." Inheritance. Margaret had only been gone for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. The funeral flowers hadn't even fully wilted before my son had started talking about liquidating unnecessary assets. I swallowed hard. "How much?" I asked. "We purchased it for $82,000. $82,000. Margaret would have laughed at that number. The car wasn't just metal and paint. It was memories. Road trips. Date nights. Her perfume lingering in the leather seats. Why would Eric sell it? Then Daniel said something that made everything worse. "Sir. I'm calling because something didn't sit right with me." I didn't speak. When I asked him why he was selling such a well-preserved family vehicle, he said, and I quote, "My wife deserves a proper honeymoon in Dubai. A car's just a car." The kitchen suddenly felt too small. Dubai. So that was it. My son had sold his mother's pride and joy to fund a luxury vacation for his wife. And he hadn't even told me. I leaned against the counter. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked quietly. Another pause. "Because," Daniel said, "when your son signed the title, he didn't realize something." "What?" "The vehicle is still registered jointly under you and your late wife's estate." I closed my eyes. Margaret had insisted on that years ago. "Just in case," she used to say. "You mean," I whispered. "It means," Daniel said carefully, "the sale may not be legally valid without your signature." The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time since Margaret died, I felt something other than grief. I felt clarity. "Where is the car now?" I asked. "We haven't listed it publicly yet." "Don't," I said. He hesitated. "I'll be there in an hour." The drive to Silvercrest felt surreal. As I pulled into the dealership lot, sunlight reflected off polished chrome. And there it was. Margaret's Mustang. Candy apple red. Immaculate. The same car she drove the night we met. I stepped out of my truck slowly. Daniel Ruiz approached me, mid-40s, professional, but nervous. "You must be Mr. Bennett." I nodded. He led me inside. The car sat under bright showroom lights like a museum piece. I ran my hand across the hood. Still smooth. Still warm from yesterday's transport. "She loved this car," I said quietly. Daniel didn't respond. He told you he inherited it? Yes, sir. He didn't. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? I reached into my jacket and pulled out a copy of Margaret's will. Margaret left everything in trust. Nothing transfers until probate finalizes. That includes this car. Daniel's face shifted. Sir, if that's true. It is. He exhaled slowly. We can freeze the transaction. The payment hasn't been released yet. Good. Very good. And Mr. Bennett, Daniel added carefully, your son mentioned he needed the funds urgently. Something about non-refundable travel arrangements. I almost laughed. Non-refundable. He was about to learn a very expensive lesson. Don't release a cent, I said. Daniel nodded. I won't. As I turned to leave, I stopped. One more thing, I said. Yes. Has he already left for Dubai? Daniel checked his tablet. He mentioned departure tomorrow evening. Tomorrow. I stepped back outside into the sun. My phone buzzed as if on cue. Eric. I stared at his name on the screen. Then I answered. Dad, he said cheerfully, I was meaning to call you. Of course you were. Oh. I replied calmly. Yeah. I sold Mom's Mustang. It was just sitting there. I figured we could use the money. We. Who's we? I asked. Well, me and Chloe. You know she's always wanted to go to Dubai. My wife's funeral picture still sat on my living room mantel. And my son was talking about desert resorts. You didn't think to discuss this with me? I asked. Dad, it was Mom's car. She's gone. Gone. The word sliced deeper than he realized. And it's my inheritance too, he added quickly. You always said it would be mine someday. Someday. Not 6 weeks after her burial. Eric, I said slowly, did you read the will? He paused. Not fully. I suggest you do. He sighed impatiently. Dad, don't make this complicated. The dealership already paid. No, I said calmly. They didn't. Silence. What do you mean? I mean, I said, keeping my voice steady, the sale isn't valid without my signature. Another silence. Then his tone shifted. You called them? They called me. I could hear Chloe's voice faintly in the background. What's going on? She asked him. Dad's interfering, he muttered. Interfering. With my own wife. Legacy. I'm not interfering, I said evenly. I'm protecting something your mother loved. It's just a car, he snapped. No, I said quietly. It's not. There was anger in his breathing now. You're being unreasonable. We already booked everything. That sounds like poor planning. He went silent again. You can't do this, he said finally. Oh, I can, I replied. And for the first time in years, I wasn't backing down. That night, I sat alone in the garage. The empty space where the Mustang usually sat felt like a wound. Margaret used to polish it every Sunday morning. She'd hum old songs while wiping the chrome. You take care of what takes care of you, she'd say. I realized something then. This wasn't about a car. It was about respect. About memory. About the fact that my son saw dollar signs where his mother saw history. My phone buzzed again. A message from Eric. We need to talk tomorrow. I stared at it. Tomorrow. Yes. We would talk. But he wasn't prepared for what tomorrow would bring. Because Margaret hadn't just protected that car with a joint registration. She had left something else in that will. Something Eric had clearly skipped over. And when he found out what it was, Dubai would be the last thing on his mind. The next morning, Eric showed up at my house earlier than I expected. He didn't knock the way he used to, 2 quick taps and then a pause. Instead, he rang the bell and waited, like he was visiting a stranger. I opened the door slowly. He looked tired. Not grieving tired. Frustrated tired. Behind him, Chloe sat in the passenger seat of their SUV, sunglasses on, scrolling through her phone. "We need to fix this," Eric said immediately, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. "Fix this." Like it was a scheduling conflict. I closed the door quietly. "Coffee?" I asked calmly. "I'm not here for coffee, Dad." I nodded. "That's obvious." He paced the living room, glancing at the framed photos on the wall. His graduation. Our family beach trip. Margaret laughing in the driver's seat of the Mustang. He avoided looking at that one. "The dealership says you blocked the payment," he said. "I didn't block anything. I simply didn't sign something." "You're making this difficult." "No," I replied evenly. "You made this difficult when you sold something that wasn't fully yours." He exhaled sharply. "Dad, Mom would have wanted me to be happy." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. "She would have wanted you to be responsible," I corrected. Silence filled the room. He finally sat down. "Look, Chloe and I already paid for flights. The hotel. Desert safari tours. It's all booked. If that money doesn't come through, we're going to lose thousands." I studied him carefully. "How much did you count on receiving?" 82,000. "And how much did you spend?" He hesitated. 35. $35,000. On a vacation. 6 weeks after his mother's death. "And the rest?" I asked. "We were going to use it as a down payment for a condo upgrade." Of course. The Mustang had become a stepping stone. I stood slowly and walked toward Margaret's old desk in the corner of the room. From the top drawer, I pulled out a sealed envelope. Eric's name written in Margaret's careful handwriting. He noticed it immediately. "What's that?" "Something your mother left for you." His expression changed. "You're just telling me this now?" "She asked me to give it to you when I felt the time was right. And now's the time." I handed it to him. "Open it." He tore it carefully. Inside was a single letter and a document copy. He unfolded the letter first. As he read, I watched his face shift. Confusion. Then discomfort. Then something else. Shame. "What is this?" he whispered. "That," I said quietly, "is your mother explaining why the Mustang was never meant to be sold." He looked up at me. "She wrote this after her diagnosis." I nodded. Margaret had known. She'd had time to prepare. Eric continued reading aloud, almost involuntarily. "Eric, my sweet boy. If you're reading this, I'm no longer here to tell you myself. The Mustang isn't just a car. It represents perseverance. It represents the years your father and I struggled but never gave up. It represents the night we brought you home from the hospital." Eric swallowed. "If you ever feel tempted to sell it quickly for something flashy, pause. Ask yourself if what you're buying will last longer than the memory you're giving up." Silence. He lowered the paper slowly. "She didn't trust me?" he asked quietly. "It wasn't about trust," I said gently. "It was about foresight." He looked at the second document. "What's this?" "That," I said, "is the clause you didn't read." He scanned it quickly. Then more slowly. Then again. "I don't understand," he murmured. "Read the highlighted section." His voice trembled slightly as he did. "The 1967 Mustang Fastback shall remain under joint ownership between my husband, Harold Bennett, and a legacy trust established in my name. Said vehicle may not be sold unless both trustees agree." Furthermore, should any heir attempt unauthorized liquidation of the vehicle, that heir's access to discretionary trust distributions may be suspended for a period determined by the surviving trustee. His eyes widened. You can suspend my trust? Yes. The color drained from his face. How much is in that trust? He asked, almost afraid of the answer. Enough, I said evenly. Margaret had been meticulous. Investments. Insurance. Long-term planning. The Mustang was symbolic, but the trust was substantial. Dad, you wouldn't. I wouldn't what? Punish me over a car. I stepped closer. This isn't punishment. It feels like it. It's consequence. He stood abruptly. You're choosing metal over your own son. I felt anger rise, but I kept it contained. No. I'm choosing integrity over impulsiveness. He ran a hand through his hair. Chloe's going to kill me. I didn't respond. Because that wasn't my concern. For the first time, Eric looked young again. Not in age, but in understanding. You're serious, he said quietly. Yes. So what now? He asked. Now, I said, you call the dealership and admit the sale was premature. He stared at me. And Dubai? That's between you and the airline. He clenched his jaw. You're humiliating me. No, I replied calmly. You did that yourself. He stood there for a long moment. Then his phone buzzed. Chloe's name flashed on the screen. He didn't answer. She already posted about the trip, he muttered. Of course she had. He looked at me again. You could just sign it, he said, softer now. You don't even drive it. That was true. I hadn't touched the Mustang since Margaret passed. It hurt too much. But that didn't mean it meant nothing. Your mother trusted me to protect what mattered to her, I said quietly. And I intend to. His shoulders dropped. So that's it? No, I said slowly. That's not it. He looked up. You want to know what the real issue is? He didn't answer. You didn't ask. The words hung heavy in the room. You didn't sit down with me. You didn't talk about what the car meant. You didn't even wait for probate. He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Because he knew. I was right. I thought you wouldn't care, he said finally. I let out a slow breath. That's the problem. Silence stretched between us. Then I added something he didn't expect. I'm not selling the car. His eyes hardened again. But I'm not keeping it either. He blinked. What? I've already spoken to Daniel at Silvercrest. You're giving it back to them? No. I walked to the window and looked outside. I'm donating it. His jaw dropped. To who? To the Veterans Restoration Foundation. Eric stared at me. They restore classic cars with wounded veterans as part of therapy programs. The Mustang will stay intact. Maintained. Preserved. And used to help people who actually understand sacrifice. He shook his head in disbelief. You'd rather give it to strangers than let your own son benefit? I'd rather honor your mother in a way that reflects her values. He stepped back like I'd physically pushed him. And my trust? That, I said evenly, depends on what you do next. His breathing slowed. He understood now. This wasn't about punishment. It was about character. He looked down at the letter in his hands. For the first time since Margaret passed, I saw tears in his eyes. I didn't think, he whispered. I know. He swallowed hard. I'll call the dealership. I nodded. And Eric? He looked up. This isn't about Dubai. He waited. It's about who you want to be. He stood there a long moment. Then he walked out the door. I watched him get into the SUV. Chloe leaned toward him immediately, animated, frustrated. The car didn't move for several minutes. Then slowly, it backed out of the driveway. I didn't know yet what he would choose. But I knew one thing for certain. Margaret had prepared for this. And whatever happened next would determine whether my son inherited more than just money. I didn't hear from Eric for the rest of the afternoon. That silence told me more than words could. He was thinking. Or arguing. Possibly both. Around 4:30 p.m., my phone rang again. Daniel Ruiz. Mr. Bennett, he said carefully, your son just called. And? I asked. He admitted the title transfer was premature. He requested we cancel the sale. I closed my eyes briefly. Good. But, Daniel continued. There it was. But what? He sounded pressured. Is everything all right? I let out a slow breath. That depends on what happens next. Daniel hesitated. Sir, I need to be transparent. We already informed a private collector about the vehicle. He was very interested. If this becomes public, there could be legal complications. Nothing becomes public, I said firmly. The sale was invalid from the beginning. Yes, sir. He paused. May I ask something personal? I considered it. Go ahead. Why not just sell it yourself? It's worth well over what we offered. With the current market, you could easily get 6 figures. Money again. Everyone saw value. Very few saw meaning. Because not everything valuable is meant to be converted into cash, I replied. There was silence on his end. I understand, he said quietly. I wasn't sure he fully did. But he respected it. I'll hold the car until you decide the next step, he added. Thank you. After the call ended, I sat in Margaret's old armchair. Her knitting basket was still beside it. Unfinished scarf. Half a pattern left. Life stops mid-row sometimes. You don't get closure. You don't get perfect endings. You get decisions. And consequences. At 6:12 p.m., Eric showed up again. This time, he knocked the old way. 2 taps. Pause. I opened the door. He looked different. Not angry. Not defensive. Just, unsettled. Can we talk? He asked quietly. I stepped aside. Chloe wasn't with him. That was telling. He sat at the kitchen table, Margaret's chair empty across from him. I canceled the trip, he said. I didn't respond. Immediately. They kept part of the deposit. We lost about $8,000. That number hung in the air. $8,000. An expensive lesson. I told Chloe we'd postpone, he continued. Postpone? I asked. Yes. And she agreed? He hesitated. Not exactly. I nodded slowly. I figured. He leaned back in the chair. She thinks you're controlling me. That's not new, I said calmly. He gave a small, humorless laugh. She said it was just a car. And what do you think? I asked. He looked down at his hands. I think I didn't realize what it meant to Mom. Silence. She wrote that letter months ago, didn't she? Yes. And she knew I might try something like this? She knew you could be impulsive. He winced slightly. That's a polite way of saying selfish. I didn't correct him. He stared at the table for a long moment. Chloe says we should fight it. That legally I'm next of kin. That you're being emotional. Emotion isn't weakness, I said evenly. He nodded slowly. I know. He looked up at me then. And the trust? That depends on you. He swallowed. You'd really suspend it? If you continue making reckless decisions with assets that aren't fully yours. Yes. He absorbed that quietly. I didn't realize how much was in it, he admitted. That's exactly why you weren't given control of it. Another silence. Then he asked something I didn't expect. What would Mom want right now? The question softened something inside me. She'd want you to understand, I said gently. Not just obey. He nodded. I keep thinking about that line in her letter. Which one? He recited it from memory. Ask yourself if what you're buying will last longer than the memory you're giving up. His voice cracked slightly. I didn't ask. No, I said quietly. You didn't. He leaned forward. What are you really planning to do with the Mustang? I studied him carefully before answering. I told you. I'm donating it. He flinched again. Is that final? Yes. Why? Because keeping it in our garage would slowly turn it into a shrine. And selling it for profit would turn it into a transaction. He listened closely. Donating it gives it purpose. He exhaled slowly. Chloe's going to hate that. This isn't about Chloe. He nodded. I know. Silence settled again, but this time, it wasn't hostile. It was reflective. I need to ask you something, he said carefully. What? Do you think I'm a bad son? The vulnerability in his voice surprised me. No, I said honestly. I think you're a son who made a bad decision. He blinked rapidly. I didn't mean to disrespect her. But you did. Yes. He swallowed. I'm sorry. The words were simple. But they were real. I saw it in his eyes. He wasn't apologizing for the lost trip. He was apologizing for the assumption. For the dismissal. For reducing something sacred into a line item. I accept your apology, I said quietly. Relief flickered across his face. But apology doesn't erase consequence, I added gently. He nodded. I understand. We sat there in silence for a moment longer. Then he asked something that shifted everything. Can I see it one more time? I looked at him carefully. The Mustang? Yes. I considered it. All right. We drove together to Silvercrest. When Daniel saw us walk in side by side, he looked relieved. The Mustang sat exactly where it had before. Under bright lights. Unmoved. Eric approached it slowly. He ran his hand over the hood, just like I had. I remember Mom teaching me how to polish this, he said quietly. She made you redo the whole side because you missed a streak, I reminded him. A faint smile appeared. Yeah. He stepped back. I was 10. You were impatient. He nodded. I still am. We stood there quietly. The car between us. Not dividing. Just present. Eric turned to me. If you're donating it, can I be there when you do? The question caught me off guard. You want to? Yes. Why? Because I want to understand. That answer mattered. Yes, I said finally. You can be there. He nodded. Then he did something I didn't expect. He turned to Daniel. Thank you for calling my dad, he said. Daniel looked surprised. Of course. Eric faced the Mustang again. I almost turned this into a plane ticket, he murmured. Yes, I said. He swallowed. I won't make that mistake again. I didn't respond. Because I hoped that was true. As we walked back toward the exit, Eric paused at the door. Dad? Yes. If Mom hadn't set that clause, would you have stopped me? I thought about that. Honesty was important now. Yes, I said. He nodded slowly. Good. Outside, the evening air felt lighter. Not perfect. Not resolved. But lighter. As we got into the truck, I realized something important. This was never about Dubai. It was about maturity. And maturity doesn't come from inheritance. It comes from understanding loss. And for the first time since Margaret passed, I believed my son was beginning to understand. The donation ceremony was scheduled for the following Saturday. I didn't tell many people. Margaret had never liked attention. She believed generosity should feel quiet, not staged. Still, the Veterans Restoration Foundation insisted on a small gathering. A few board members. 2 mechanics who ran the therapy program. And 3 veterans currently enrolled. Eric said he would be there. Chloe did not. That didn't surprise me. The morning of the ceremony, I woke up earlier than usual. The house felt different. Not emptier. Just, transitioning. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, Margaret's chair still across from me, but for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel crushed by it. Grief was still there. But it wasn't suffocating. It had shape now. Purpose. At 9:15 a.m., Eric pulled into the driveway. Alone. He stepped out wearing a plain button-down shirt, not his usual designer polo. Small detail. But I noticed. Ready? He asked quietly. As I'll ever be. The drive to the Foundation's workshop took 30 minutes. It wasn't a polished showroom like Silvercrest. It was an old converted warehouse on the edge of town. Inside, the air smelled like oil, metal, and effort. 3 classic cars sat in different stages of restoration. One veteran, mid-30s, prosthetic leg, was carefully sanding a fender panel. Another older man adjusted wiring beneath a dashboard. They looked up as we entered. Daniel had arranged transport earlier that morning. Margaret's Mustang now sat in the center of the workshop. Under softer light this time. Less display. More work. The Foundation director, Mrs. Alvarez, approached us warmly. Mr. Bennett, we're honored. I nodded. My wife would have liked this place. Eric stood quietly beside me. Mrs. Alvarez gestured toward the veterans. This program helps with PTSD, mobility therapy, and reintegration. Classic cars require patience. Focus. Teamwork. Eric studied the Mustang. Not as a commodity. As something about to continue. Would you like to say a few words? She asked me. I hadn't prepared anything formal. But sometimes the best words aren't rehearsed. I stepped forward. This car belonged to my wife, Margaret, for over 40 years, I began. Eric's posture shifted slightly. She believed in preserving things that mattered. Not because they were expensive, but because they carried stories. The veterans listened quietly. When my son and I faced a disagreement about its future, we realized something important. I glanced at Eric. Legacy isn't about possession. It's about intention. Silence filled the workshop. I could have kept this car locked away in a garage. Or I could have sold it for profit. But neither would honor the resilience it represents. I rested my hand on the hood one final time. Now it belongs somewhere it can continue doing what it always did, bring people together. The room stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then one of the veterans spoke. Sir, what was her name? Margaret, I said. He nodded. We'll keep that name on it. Eric inhaled sharply beside me. Mrs. Alvarez smiled. We don't rename donated vehicles. We preserve their history. Eric stepped forward unexpectedly. Can I say something? He asked softly. All eyes turned to him. He looked nervous, but determined. I almost sold this car for a vacation, he admitted. The honesty surprised even me. I told myself it was practical. That memories don't pay bills. He swallowed. But I was wrong. The room remained still. My mom valued this car because it survived hard times with them. Because it symbolized endurance. He paused. And I almost traded endurance for comfort. He exhaled slowly. I'm glad I didn't. That was all he said. But it was enough. Afterward, the veterans gathered around the Mustang, discussing restoration plans. One of them, the man with the prosthetic leg, approached Eric. You ever work on cars? He asked. Eric hesitated. Not seriously. You should come by sometime. We could use another pair of hands. Eric glanced at me. Then back at him. Yeah, he said quietly. I'd like that. That evening, after the ceremony, Eric came back to my house again. Alone. We sat in the living room. No tension this time. Just quiet understanding. Chloe's not thrilled, he admitted. I assumed. She thinks I let you manipulate me. Did I? He shook his head slowly. No. Silence. She said we could have used that money to upgrade our life. And what do you think now? I asked. He stared at the floor for a moment. I think I almost downgraded who I am. That answer told me more than any apology. He looked up. I don't want you to suspend the trust. I won't, I said calmly. His shoulders dropped slightly. But I'm adding a condition. He blinked. What kind of condition? You'll attend the restoration program twice a month. He stared at me. That's it? That's it. Why? Because money without perspective becomes entitlement. He considered that. And if I don't go? Then we revisit the conversation. A small smile tugged at his lips. Fair enough. He stood up to leave. At the door, he paused. Dad? Yes. I miss her. The simplicity of that confession nearly broke me. I do too, I said quietly. For the first time since Margaret's funeral, we hugged. Not stiff. Not obligatory. Real. After he left, I walked into the garage. The empty space where the Mustang once sat no longer felt like a wound. It felt complete. My phone buzzed again. Daniel Ruiz. Mr. Bennett, he said warmly, I heard about the donation. Word travels fast. It does. He paused. I wanted you to know, that private collector I mentioned earlier. He called back. Oh. He was impressed by your decision. Said integrity like that is rare. I didn't respond. He also mentioned he runs a business mentorship foundation. He's looking to sponsor young professionals with leadership training. I listened carefully. He asked if your son might be interested. I leaned back slightly. That's unexpected. I thought you should know. After we hung up, I stood quietly in the garage. Life has strange ways of correcting direction. If Eric had sold the Mustang quietly, he would have gained a trip. Maybe a condo upgrade. But he would have lost something deeper. Instead, he lost $8,000. And gained perspective. The Mustang was no longer ours. But its lesson remained. And Margaret, in her careful foresight, had done what she always did. She protected our family. Not from poverty. But from ourselves. I turned off the garage light. Closed the door. And for the first time since she passed, I felt at peace.